Welcome back to Capital Market Live on Channels Television. As usual, we're live on Twitter at Channels TV, the handle, and at CTV Temple, my personal handle, just in case you've got your thoughts to leave on what we've been discussing right on the show. Well, we've had in the studio Mr. Tayo Orekoya, who is the President and Chief Executive of Pearl Awards, and that's about the only award that I know that has been in this capital market for 22 years now. So we've been looking at issues of corporate governance in companies that are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Mr. Orekoya, you were referencing the need for a harmonized industry-wide code in the Nigerian capital market. We had something like that from FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, until what went wrong, at the leadership level there. So how pressing is the need for this code right now for us to be able to address issues like weak corporate governance that we've been seeing on so many companies?
Well, thank you very much. I think the issue of harmonized, or rather unified code of corporate governance is critical. It is key, and I'm happy to note that just in the course of this week, the new Chief Executive of the Financial Reporting Council has said that the Unified National Code of Corporate Governance will be revisited.
Right.
And I think they're setting up a committee to look at that. However, I would like to say that in doing that, it's not just a question of the Financial Reporting Council putting together this committee. Let them get together the stakeholders, major stakeholders from the banking industry, the insurance industry, the pensions industry, let them come together to look at this unified code, so that even if we have this overarching code, we can also have sector or industry-specific codes, which will be in tandem with the Unified National Code.
I may be wrong, but from what I've gathered so far from you, it looks like the reason we are having a failure of corporate governance on boards of companies right now is as a result of the failure of regulations. But we've seen quite a number of initiatives, like the Convention on Business Integrity that integrated a rating system on the Nigerian Stock Exchange a few years ago. What's your assessment of all of these initiatives that the SEC and NSE has actually done?
Well, I would want to commend the initiative by the Nigerian Stock Exchange, putting together the corporate governance rating system. However, I must say that as good as that is, it also has its own issues. For example, I know that a number of companies have emerged on the premium board based on this particular initiative.
Yeah.
But again, the issue of the benchmark being given, I think it's about 200 billion market capitalization, for companies to be able to be qualified
for the
premium board, I think needs to be looked into. And again, I agree absolutely, because when you look at that initiative, it will go a very long way in actually engendering compliance, and also for companies to aspire. So it's like a sanctions and reward system. Okay. And that's what I like about that particular initiative.
But in aspiring for that position or for that level of the board, don't you think it could also promote infractions, pitfalls in the system?
Yes, but the good thing about it is, look, the way the corporate governance rating system is, you look at first the issue of corporate integrity. That is, the company will be able to assess itself. And then you go from that level to regulatory integrity. That will be now assessed by the regulatory authorities. Beyond that, you get to another level where there is accreditation of the directors and other committees like the ethics committee, the risk committee, and all that, before you now come into multi-stakeholder assessment. So it's not one level. And I think if we can if the stock exchange can make sure this happens and companies are able to submit themselves for this assessment, then I believe the issue of it's not just because, yes, you're large. Otherwise, what it creates is a segregation. Look, it's between them and us. And you don't want that kind of thing to happen, particularly when it comes to the issue of corporate governance.
All right. Well, you are responsible for PL Awards. You have been doing this in the Nigerian capital market for 22 years. You reward a lot of companies. You reward participants in the market, market watchers, observers, everyone who actually has a key role to play in the capital market. Based on what you've done with the Board of Governors at PL Awards this year and what we've seen so far in the Nigerian capital market, the performances relating to corporate governance issues that we've talked about, those that are resolving theirs, those that have theirs, those that have technical full suspension. What have you put together for the markets this time?
Well, what we have done, at the PL Awards Nigeria, is to actually ensure that we don't just reward corporate excellence. We reward corporate excellence in compliance with good corporate governance. Okay. And as such, in 2015, during the 20th anniversary of the PL Awards, we instituted the Good Corporate Governance Awards. And we actually based the criteria on the SEC Code of Good Corporate Governance, in addition to the performance criteria of the PL Awards. And of course, this is to ensure that these companies perform, deliver, and then the stakeholders, the shareholders, are the ultimate beneficiaries.
So you've honored so many companies over the years. What insights can you give on the, based on performance levels anyways, of some of these companies as to winners that have emerged this time?
You mean for this year?
For this year, yeah.
Okay, well, what we have seen is that you will recall that the awards did not take place last year, but we have observed that things are looking up generally this year, and companies are doing better. If you look at the reports of performance of the companies this year compared to last year, you will see an improvement. And of course, it's reflected also on performance in the capital market. So we believe, once again, it is time to reward excellence. And of course, that's why come November 26th, we will be having the next edition of the PL Awards.
So, what are the yardsticks you're using this time, to determine who emerges first, who goes next, who are the nominees?
Okay, well, I must say, you see, what stands the PL Awards apart, what makes it unique over the past 22 years is that right from day one, we decided that these awards was going to be based on empirical performance. And we have 9 indices to reward excellence, including turnover growth, earnings yield, returns on equity, net asset ratio, profit margin ratio, share price appreciation. We have dividend yield, dividend cover, and you would, of course, agree that these are internationally recognized indices to actually be able to assess the performance of companies. And of course, we have a system whereby these companies compete against one another in the sectors they belong, using the 9 indices. Again, we also have the Market Excellence Awards category, where all the companies come together based on each of the 9 indices. Again, we have a technical board of the awards, headed by a past Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Mr. Wale Adetunji, who, that actually reviews all these things before the winners emerge.
So you have people of integrity, men of integrity on the board, and it's time for companies that are challenged with corporate governance, weak corporate governance practices on their board now to amend their ways and, of course, be able to do things right enough to come back to winning your award, PL's award. Mr. Tayo Orekoya, thank you very much for making it down to Capital Market this evening. We really appreciate your time. Mr. Tayo Orekoya is the President and Chief Executive of PL's Awards. That's all the time we have this evening. Thanks so much for watching the program. I'm Temple Ashaju. Of course, again, I'll see you next time.